let's have a session on if changing the organisational culture is necessary for the business to become more innovative. So firstly, organisational culture. Well, organisational culture is basically the collective personality of the organisation. You're thinking about its beliefs, your values, your norms, your personality, your character. Now, your organisational culture, well, maybe yes, you need to change it to become more innovative because you've currently, if you're thinking about handies, classifications, you've got a role culture, which is very bureaucratic, very rigid. You've got to adhere to your responsibilities, to your roles. Then, yeah, that's not very innovative. If you're thinking about a role culture, that makes sense in a static, in a stable environment, not in one where you need to change, become more innovative. So it might be you want to switch away from a role culture towards a task culture, and a task culture is very collaborative, it's very flexible, it's got a project focus, so you can put your best people on the most important projects, and maybe the most important project is for the organisation to become more innovative. So it's more innovative if you use task culture, you're more able to adapt to change, you become more flexible. Now, the other thing to think about is if you are using a task culture, you might want to question what's the current organisational structure that's different to culture. So what is the organisational structure you're using? And if you're using a task culture, then it might make sense that you want to merge it with an organisational structure that is a matrix structure because it suits in that situation. So it depends if you've got a match there in culture and structure. Now, it's not necessary. Reasons why it might not be necessary to change the organisational culture. Well, maybe they're already using a task culture, so you don't need to change it. You're already there in terms of your culture. Also, maybe you don't want to change your organisational culture because it will just take too long. And changing organisational culture is going to be filled with lots of resistance to change. It's going to take lots of resources in terms of time, in terms of money, and therefore it might just not make sense for the business. It depends on how important it is. Now, there are other ways to become more innovative as an organisation. Firstly is Kaizen. Now, Kaizen is continuous improvement. You're making those small incremental changes. It became famous because of the Toyota production system. And then you could also use benchmarking. Now, benchmarking is you might look at your current processes that you use throughout the business and compare them to your rivals, compare them to the industry. And if there's something you're seeing that could make you more innovative, then you copy that in terms of using best practice. Now, you could try and make your organisation more intrapreneurial. So that could be that you encourage your employees to behave more entrepreneurially. So they're more risk-taking and therefore they're more likely to be creative, more likely to lead to innovation. Now, the final thing you could do is research and development. Of course, that's going to cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, so it depends on how long you've got to become innovative. So there's other solutions there: Kaizen, benchmarking, entrepreneurship, research, development, K-Bird. See you at the next sesh.